Hey everybody, this is Garrett with Earth and Time, and today I'm coming to you from one of my favorite places in all of my hometown of Houston, and that is a place called Mercer Arboretum. It's a free garden. It's about 30 minutes north of downtown Houston or so. But what they have here that I want to share with you all is not only the beautiful flowers here during spring, but they also have a prehistoric garden. And I want to talk a little bit about the history of plants, the fossil record of plants, and go explore that garden as well as the rest of the greater Mercer Arboretum. So come join me today. Let's learn about plants. Let's get to it. My first stop has to be to say hi to Thelma Mercer, who actually donated all the land here, and she was about 98 years old when she passed away. But this was a lot of her family's land and land that she donated along what's known as Cypress Creek, and there are tens and tens of acres, miles and miles of trails here, and all kinds of beautiful flowers in this garden, and this was all due to her generous donation. One of the things I love most about this garden, it's a place I come quite often, is the tranquility here and how they've really set up such a beautiful space on this north end of the city. Let's take a look at different portions of the gardens on our way to the prehistoric garden. The flowers are in full bloom here on an April weekend. Absolutely gorgeous. Yeah, the bumblebees out. Spring has definitely sprung here in southeastern Texas. My favorite, snapdragons. As many of you know, I'm a geologist, a paleontologist, and a historian. And one of the things we can talk about when we look at all these plants is the story of life, and specifically the story of plants. So plants came onto the scene way back in the Ordovician, which is well before the time of the dinosaurs. And during that time, the plants were very simple, eventually ending up with flowering plants and plants that bear fruit, which were actually very late comers in the story of plants. There's just a little anole on that sign. So the anole being a lizard or reptile. And reptiles, of course, we're going to talk a lot about the time of the dinosaurs, a family of reptiles that are now extinct, whose timeline we can use and individuals are familiar with. So a lot of times I'll talk about things in the time before the dinosaurs, during the dinosaurs, and after the dinosaurs. I will say these are some of the most peaceful gardens, and I love how they've started decorating this section. They even have a desert landscape portion with some rocks. Geologist's favorite type of garden, a rock garden. A rock garden is the one type of garden I think I can keep alive. And I found a little fairy town hidden underneath this tree over here and amongst these bushes. And some really cool sculptures. I hope they're not trying to eat the fairies. Of course, they have a fairy garden, so they also have a little gnome town down here as well. Hey, King Arthur, move over. The shovel and the stones. Who sith pulleth out the shovel of these strong stones is rightwise named Guardian of the Garden. I am not the guardian of the garden. But I can be the keeper of this giant chair. I found something amazing. Let's see if we can go through this maze. Do I go this way? Nope, dead end number one. Let's keep going. Working my way around the other direction. Woohoo! I see a way out. I don't think that's an official way out though, but there's an exit. We'll keep going. We're going to find our way. Here we go. Here we are. I made it through the simplest garden maze I've ever seen, but it would be a lot of fun, especially for little kids. The amazing part is it comes right out at this little garden area. I will say around every turning corner here, there's something that looks like it should be captured for a calendar or somewhere that would make an amazing picture opportunity. This part looks like it could be somewhere in Greece or somewhere in Italy. Absolutely beautiful. Still have not found the prehistoric garden yet going this way. but we're on the hunt. And we'll enjoy all the beautiful scenery until we find it. I'm at a crossroads. Let's go check out Story Lake and Creekside Ramble. I don't know if any of you can hear, but there's cardinals singing, and I hear mockingbirds, and I've seen blue jays, all kinds of birds. And I found a turtle. In case any of you live in any of these areas or close to them, you get an idea about how far many of these cities are from where I'm at right now. LA is about 1,300 miles, New York City is 1,400 miles, Paris is 5,000, Mexico City is 700, Austin's about 150 miles. They have a nice display here to bees, and off in the distance there you can actually see some of the beehives. Bees, of course, are very important as pollinators today, but the original pollinators were actually beetles way back in the fossil record. So bees didn't come around until about 100 million years ago during the time of the dinosaurs. And then that's also when flowering plants really became much more abundant. So by the time the dinosaurs went extinct, there were a lot more flowering plants than when dinosaurs first came onto the scene, which there were none. What a beautiful path and a beautiful area. While I'm walking back to the Story Lake, we can talk a little bit about some of the questions I get. So I get emails from folks, I get comments from folks. Thank you all for all those, by the way. And I tried to respond to all of them. One of the questions I've gotten recently is, what do geologists actually do? Is studies the earth and finds resources associated with the earth for all of us to use. As you're sitting on your computer or your phone watching this right now, there are a lot of minerals and types of rocks that go into making your phones, your computers, your TVs possible. And it's actually the job of a geologist to find all those minerals. So things like gold and silver and lithium for your batteries, and even the oil and gas that you use day to day that help generate the power for your computers and your phones, even the wind turbines that are used, the steel and iron and metal and aluminum all goes into those. It takes a geologist to find that raw material. In fact, this bridge across is a great example of things that geologists find that most people don't realize. Everything from the limestone used to make the concrete that we use for our sidewalks and paths and walls, to the steel and iron that's used to actually make the bridge. It's geologists that go find and map out those deposits and actually work with engineers and companies to try to figure out how to extract it. And then from there, of course, the engineers create it into what we see today, and architects make these beautiful designs out of that material. But all that raw material, like we see for this bridge, is all found by geoscientists originally. Even the gravel that we see here, a lot of times geoscientists will go find and map out gravel deposits so companies can go mine it and then use it for things like these pathways. And there's a special group of geoscientists known as hydrogeologists or hydrologists that actually find water. So a lot of the water that you use every day, especially in cities and large municipal areas, are all found by geoscientists. So they actually go out, they map what was known as the aquifer, try to understand that layer, how big it is, how much water it can supply, and where to place wells to help communities have enough water to do everything from us taking showers to cooking to watering our gardens like we see here. So then the next question is, well, are there lots of jobs in geoscience and geology? And the answer is yes. Everything from the folks who find those raw materials to individuals that are trying to just better understand things like earthquakes and volcanoes, to individuals looking to understand the history of life, which we've talked about a little bit and we'll continue talking about. I'd like to point out the gasoline used to make that lawnmower go over here that we can hear in the background. That material was actually found by a geoscientist. Well, I made it to Story Lake and it is gorgeous. You can see there's irises popping up along here. If you look carefully on that log, there's a whole bunch of turtles. These are painted turtles. I will say, if you want a nice, quiet, tranquil place just to come think, come relax, you can come sit here and hang out in this pagoda. I used to bring lunches here sometimes and have them on the weekends with my daughter when she was young. It was a lot of fun. Oh, we were talking about the early time of the dinosaurs earlier. So what we have in front of us, or something we see quite often here in the southeastern part of the United States, and these are cypress trees, and they often grow along swamp ways. You'll see what are known as cypress knees over here, but cypress trees actually showed up on the scene during the early time of the dinosaurs in what's known as the Triassic. And so these are ancient, if you will, living fossils themselves. Pretty neat to see a whole grove of these. As we walk around the Arboretum here, I've been talking a lot about the fossil record and what we know about ancient life and this idea about geologic time. So I'm holding a geologic time scale, and when I talk about the time of the dinosaurs, if it's the later time of the dinosaurs, it's this Cretaceous time, and apologies about the shadow there. If it's the mid time of the dinosaurs, it's the Jurassic there in blue, and if it's the early time of the dinosaurs, it's the Triassic. You'll see the time goes from 250 million years ago all the way up to about 66 million years ago. So you can think about the idea that dinosaurs were around for about 200 million years. That's a really long time that dinosaurs were around, and we still know so little about them. So I'll go ahead and plug this. This is a Dinosaurs and Other Prehistoric Animals of Texas brochure I picked up, I think at a HEB or a Kroger here in town, and it's been really useful as I travel around. I learn about some of the life here in Texas, but really useful because it's got that geologic timeline on it, and I can talk to you all about those different time periods. I'm pretty sure the lawnmower guy's just following me to mess with me because I'm filming. Here's a beautiful view of some irises here with some of those cypress, what they call knees, where they erode down and they create this kind of classic bayou swampy look. Minus the iris, this could have been what some of the early dinosaurs were walking through, some of these cypress knees, and walking through these types of forests. Here's a little bit about those. Bald cypress from swamps to city streets. That gives you an idea. So something like that with the palms and the ferns and the cypress trees very much going to look like what dinosaurs roamed through in the Triassic and Jurassic. And you can see a whole bunch of these knees here popping up. Yeah, at this point I'm very sure he's just messing with me. He's just driving back and forth on the sidewalk. Oh, here's a bunch of bamboo. Interesting enough, bamboo as a plant's pretty late to the scene. It was from kind of the mid-time of the Cenozoic, what we know as the Oligocene, maybe even the Eocene, which is very late in geologic time, well past the time of the extinction of the dinosaurs. To some of the earliest terrestrial plants, and during the time of basically the mega insects and maybe the earliest amphibians, and this would have been during something like the Devonian, going into the Carboniferous, time well before the dinosaurs. So the next time you go to an arboretum, you're walking around the garden, just think about the old history of these plants and how long they've been around. And not just that, but that you're looking at what a lot of people say, where we find these old animals like a coelacanth, which is a type of fish they thought was extinct, and they call it a living fossil. Well, so many of these plants that we see around are just that. They're living fossils. I will say, I just love Texas in the spring. You get so many flowers here, and there's actually lots of flowers that are out in the hill country area, which I didn't get a chance to go see this year. Hopefully another time I'll be able to take you all out there with me and go visit those, maybe next year. But all these arboretums right now, the flowers are just absolutely spectacular. Now, lilies, interesting enough, as far as their fossil record goes, first showed up on the scene during the later time of the dinosaurs, what's known as the Cretaceous. Let's find that prehistoric garden now. I made it back to the path, and I see rocks up ahead, although I can tell you right now those are not real rocks, but that is the gateway to the prehistoric garden. Roar! Prehistoric garden. Before we get into the prehistoric garden, I do want to open up this timeline to show past the time of the dinosaurs is where we're at today in the Cenozoic, but before that was what was known as the Paleozoic. And we're going to talk about some of the ancestors of these plants that we're going to see here were from the Devonian. Those are some of the oldest plants that we'll see here. Some things in the Carboniferous, and then getting into the Permian. And a lot of these plants actually are from the time of the dinosaurs, the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. So I just wanted to give you an idea about this timeline going from the oldest stuff here goes up, gets younger there, still really old for us. That's 250 million years there. And then starting at that point, working all the way up to modern day. One of the first plants we'll see as we start entering into this prehistoric garden is actually what's known as a cycad. And cycads were actually a food for dinosaurs, but they came on the scene much, much earlier in the Permian time frame, maybe even as old as the Carboniferous. But dinosaurs have been known, based on evidence of what we call coprolites or dinosaur poop, it's known that dinosaurs ate actually cycads. All right, we're leaving the time of today, going into the land of yesterday as I cross through these faux rocks. Right off the bat, there's a little dinosaur relative right there. There's a little reptile. It's an anole. So we can see another type of cycad back there, and then a much younger baby one that looks very prehistoric right there. As I look at these first few plants as I come in, it definitely looks prehistoric with these old cycads. There's a sago palm over here, and the palms actually are interesting, especially these types of palms that we see here are ancient from the time of the dinosaurs, but much, much younger than the cycads that we see. In fact, some of these palms are from the later time of the dinosaurs, the Cretaceous. I also like that they put a lot of rocks in here. So they also have a bit of a rock garden. So there's a lot of sandstone that I see in here. So we're talking about the types of rocks. And these rocks actually could be close to the time of the dinosaurs. We cannot talk about prehistoric trees without finding some petrified wood. So here's some petrified wood stumps standing up in the ground here. And there's some spectacular examples. One thing I'll let you all know is the state stone of Texas is actually petrified palm, which is a type of petrified wood. And the pieces of petrified palm actually came from after the time of the dinosaurs, about 40 or 50 million years ago. Dinosaurs went extinct about 66 million years ago. And the amazing things that we can see on these chunks of petrified wood is you can actually see some preserved bark in some portions. And just like modern trees, you can actually see the tree rings have been preserved and mineralized. So these have all been replaced by silica. And it's through a process called permineralization, where the silica actually replaces the organic material as this is buried and water flows through it. We can actually see really nice examples of the bark here too on this one piece. So let's count the rings and find out how old this tree is. All right, 1,000,001, 1,000,002, 1,000,003, 1,000,004. Just kidding. I do like seeing all of this petrified wood here in the prehistoric garden. So during the course of this video, we've been talking about different plants through ages, and they actually have a nice sign here to talk about that history of plants. Great that they actually put a sign here talking about how the earliest plants were some kind of mosses, and then ferns, and then things called gymnosperms. So you can think of those as pine trees, ginkgos, some plants that we'll probably see around here. But then following that came the angiosperms, or the flowering plants and fruit plants. One of the earliest of those is actually known as the magnolia, and it was actually around before bees were around. They actually think beetles pollinated those. And I am in southeastern Texas, so I know there's magnolias around. Let's see if we can find one for you all. Big tree right here is a magnolia. So one of the earliest flowering types of plants are magnolias. Whoa, I don't know what that is. A tachycarum. That is fascinating. I'm gonna have to do some research. I don't know what this plant is, never heard of it, but it sure looks prehistoric and really, really cool. And here's a much smaller magnolia. You can actually see a flower starting to bloom up there. One of the really old families of trees are actually the ginkgo, and they actually have a picture of the fossil leaf. Now, ginkgos came onto the scene about 300 million years ago, which is pretty crazy, and they're basically unchanged since that time, since before the time of the dinosaurs. There's a little dinosaurian type friend right there on the sign. Pretty amazing. You look at that picture of the fossil leaf, and then you actually look at the leaves, and they look identical. Here is actually a pine. Now, pines are interesting because I've read different stories. It depends on the family of pines, but pines can be as young as kind of the mid time of the dinosaurs, about 140 million years ago, to redwoods, which are closer to about 200 million years ago, is where they found kind of the earliest fossils of them. I'm so excited. The Girl Scouts did something really cool. Check this out. First, shout out to Girl Scout Troop 106016, so 10616. One of my favorite things in the world to share. In fact, you can look through my videography and you'll see a lot of videos on this subject. They put in dinosaur trackways. Look at dinosaur trackway. Wow, so cool. Way to go, Girl Scout Troop 10616. This is amazing. So they made molds and they made casts of all these out of concrete. And you can see the dinosaurs walking right through here. Now, if we have to decide what type of dinosaur this would be, the angle of the digits suggests theropod, a meat eater, but the rounded tips suggest something more like a hadrosaur or an herbivore. But either way, these are really cool. I love them. Way to go. And really makes it feel prehistoric. What a cool and informative garden. One thing that would be really neat is if they actually put pictures like they did for the ginkgo, and they talked about the angiosperms and gymnosperms over here. They actually had some signs up about or show pictures of some of the early fossils. Maybe that's something I'll talk to the folks here. This is a volunteer community that takes care of the gardens here and works them for the most part. There are official workers here too, and thank you to all those folks for being so kind. Okay, from the prehistoric garden here, we're gonna go walk through and take a look. They actually have a path with a bunch of lilies over here. I would like to see if they're all in bloom, and then go through their jungle section, and then we'll call it a day. As I'm walking away from the prehistoric garden, one thing we didn't talk about are oaks. And oaks are actually pretty interesting. The earliest oak fossils are actually found in Argentina. And some of the earliest evidence of them was from just after the time of the dinosaurs. It's pretty interesting, and I'm sure there's oaks somewhere here. I'm in the South, and we have southern oaks and live oaks and all kinds of oaks here. I just don't see one right by me right now to share with y'all. All right, so there are some lilies out here, not a ton of them. There's some really pretty lilies. Here's an oak. This is a white oak. And we're talking about oaks first coming on the scene after the time of the dinosaurs. And as I turn around, I see the backside of a monkey hanging out of a palm tree. That's something new. I'm heading into their jungle section or tropical plant section now. Unfortunately, we've been hit by a series of freezes here in southern Texas over the last couple of years. I think that event damaged a lot of these plants, and it's not nearly as lush as I remember it. I don't know what that guy ate, but I sure don't want any of it. Oh, the banana plants are bouncing back. Look at that. Some canna. I think they call that Bengal canna or tiger canna because of the stripes. Again, I studied rocks and dinosaurs, not plants. There's a plant that looks like it belongs inside of the prehistoric garden. This is what I need right now. Whee! All right, some more beautiful flowers. As I work my way out of Mercer, I want to thank you all for joining me today. I hope you learned something new. I know I did. I was doing some fact checking along the way with, our good old-fashioned phones. I was glad I was able to share that time chart with you. Having one of those available if you're interested in geosciences or earth history is really important, and it can really help you understand some of the context that I talk about or others out there or things that you read. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this channel. Keep up on all my adventures focused on earth history, on fossils, even on U.S. history as we explore and learn about the 250th anniversary of the United States this year. And more importantly, everybody take care out there. I look forward to seeing you all in the next adventure. Bye for now. And that's the way to walk out of an arboretum with a fully blooming magnolia tree. Thanks, Thelma. I really appreciate this place.